I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, my title is Souls and Roles, and I am speaking unscripted from the heart. It seems like every other day, I'm being asked to either not criticize someone because they have a good heart, they're a good person, they're on our side, or I'm being asked to denounce someone as absolute evil. And if I will not do that, then I must be on their side. I must be either part of that agenda or hopelessly deluded. So today I want to talk about souls and why the superiority of a soul to another is illogical. And that's not speaking from the feminine side of the brain about intuition or light and fluffy things. I am just talking logic. And then I want to look at roles and how there are only two. And people are serving one or the other. And I'll be giving 4 examples. Yuval Harari, Mathew Crawford, Russell Brand, and Trump. Let's look at the soul. I went to Catholic school, and we were taught that you started out innocent, your soul as white milk. And every time you did something wrong, a little bit of chocolate was added until finally you were that deep, dark chocolate that could not be redeemed. Now, as a fan of chocolate, that didn't really alarm me too much, and you can see what happened. The soul comes from an ancient word that means a drop of the ocean, because that was originally how it was thought of. Now we think of it as a little bit of the ego, something that is us, essentially us, before we have a body, and that leaves our body after we die and goes somewhere else. But it keeps us as an individual. This gives us the ability to feel like we can be morally superior to other people with those deep, dark chocolate sins. So if we're superior, where does that come from? There's a concept that seems very popular among men in particular, that 3% of people are born as psychopaths. So if someone is born as a psychopath, and I'm not sure why, to moms, the idea that one of your kids could be just born as a psychopath doesn't seem to have much resonance. But let's say someone is born as a psychopath. You can't blame them. They were born that way. You need compassion for them. There has to be something that created that genetically, or maybe we need prenatal testing to get rid of those little devil babies, because I think that's where this concept is heading. But it's not something where you can blame them. They had no choice before they were born. And then we look at what happens to people after they're born. If you have a greater capacity to choose good, no matter what your choices were, and that wasn't given to you by your parents, your upbringing, books you read, or anything in your life. You just were born with that better capacity for free will. Then that says that people are born unequal, because again, you're being born with that. There's nothing that you are really responsible for. There's no way to extract that little bit of your individuality and say, okay, no matter where I had been dropped into, whose life I had been dropped into, I would still retain my moral purity. It doesn't make logical sense. What is the cost of condemning just one person? Long ago, I asked this question about Hitler. As someone who studied A Course in Miracles once said to me, sooner or later with this forgiveness, you get to Hitler, Jeffrey Dahmer, and your ex. So we all know where that went. I asked a spiritual question of what would have made me make the decisions that at that time I thought Hitler had. And the more that I pulled on that thread, the more that the whole fabric unraveled. And fabric of propaganda is lies and truth that are interwoven together. If there is just one person who is born with a greater capacity to choose evil, that means that there is no meaning. And another way of saying it is there is no God other than the kind of God who could pick favorites, like Yahweh, who has a chosen people, or like the Father of Jesus, to whom only one is worthy enough to be a blood sacrifice in order to forgive all the rest of us with chocolate milk souls. When I relate to anyone, I'm always thinking of them as a soul, that part of them that wants exactly the same things that I do, which is for everyone to have power over themselves. What conflicts with that can be a role that is serving empire, and empire is having power over others. So if someone is consciously serving a different role, the best thing that I can do is expose that, is make that obvious so that it makes it more possible for them to align their role, because it's not working anymore, with their soul and their intention. On my last article, someone commented that it was a great explanation of good versus evil. And I said that looking at these dynasties who are looking to rule the world, they go back 200 generations. So I don't think there is enough money in the world that could induce that person to trade places with one of those children born into those families where we know that things like child rape, child sacrifice, torture, all of this is happening in a way that is creating trauma that makes sure that people are serving that same agenda generation after generation. It's not because you're a more moral person that you wouldn't choose that. It's because no sensible person would, including them. Let's start with Yuval Harari. And I think it's interesting that Noah is always used, since the Noahide covenant is what gave the Shemites the right to rule the world, to occupy Canaan, to have the descendants of Ham, which is Egypt, Africa, and Asia, be their slaves. And that is something that is a big part of this agenda that's going on. He revealed his colors in terms of October 7th and being a promoter of the false narrative, and there's no more outspoken person representing the World Economic Forum. But at the same time, he gives us useful information, phrases like useless eaters. He reveals their hand in a way that we can use. And so I think that within that role, there is also a soul that wants to fail, that wants the other side to succeed, that wants everyone to reclaim their own sovereignty. Now let's look at Mathew Crawford. A while ago, I put out a piece called Bitcoin versus the Carrot, in which I said that Bitcoin may be a good short-term bet, something that can protect your financial sovereignty in the short term, but that in the long term, it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't give people power over themselves. And I show how my carrot system protects that sovereignty. Because of that, Mathew put out a parody piece in which he said that I was mentally ill. But that wasn't enough for him. He's also contacted someone who had scheduled an interview with me and told him why he should not trust me. And one of his reasons is because I will not denounce Russell Brand. So let me read what it is that Mathew wrote about Russell Brand. I'm not saying Russell Brand is a rapist. I repeat, I can't know that with any certainty. But my experience and intuition tells me that there are few variables that better correlate with rapiness than a guy who wants to start a yoga studio. Women are different than men. They are attracted to the guru types, so long as they are sufficiently beautiful or charming. They generally face either cognitive dissonance or blackmail that binds them emotionally. And typically, they do not change course until they or many others have been hurt very badly. I suspect that this is at least part of the reason we have seen so many women of questionable character thrust into positions of power over the last generation, where a man might tell in 20 seconds when he walks into a sex cult masked as a yoga studio. In a strip mall, Katie Griggs found magic in 20 seconds, which is apparently believable to a lot of other women. What Mathew is saying, therefore, is that I can't be trusted because of my discernment. As a woman, everyone knows I think with my vagina. A sexy guy walks in and all capacity to reason jumps out the window. We are driven by our hormones, unlike men, who are retaining their capacity to think, even around beautiful women in hot yoga pants. And that's why they never use them in advertising. What good would it do? To be clear on my current position on Russell Brand, I am fairly certain that he was a very important person to the Illuminati through 2012 and his marriage to Katy Perry. I think they were king and queen of the underworld. I do think, again, he was captured after the sextroversy, and his shilling for Trump and the religious conversion, I think, are all a part of that. So the only question is whether there was a decade in between when he walked away and was speaking for himself and thinking for himself. Some of the clues that I see there is that he did leave that marriage, and being at the pinnacle like that, I'm not sure why he would do that if he was still a part of it. I also know that he left $44 million on the table that he was entitled to half of as Katy Perry's income during those 14 months. That also doesn't seem to match this concept of someone driven by greed. So maybe he ran, and if he did, there are things we should be paying attention to. What was it that he's been saying that they made sure they didn't want to get out there? And I don't think that was about COVID. I think it's been about Israel. Back in 2009, he was very outspoken about Israel and Palestine, and one of the only people who was. And 2009 is when Katy Perry and he got together. I think that's a clue, and I think that's what they want to make sure is not coming out right now. And to end with Trump, if someone needs to play the role of bringing this all to a culmination, bringing it to a head, I'm glad it's the one that is covered in orange hair and not me. For more on the spiritual woo-woo side, here is Drops of God, which has video effects by Tonica of Visceral Adventures. And on the practical side, this is Bitcoin versus the carrot. Thank you for watching.